What's going on, lacrosse fans? Welcome to the PLL Flash on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Hulsebos, joined by Flash Editor-in-Chief Austin Owens, as we're about to look back at the first round of the 2021 PLL playoffs, the quarterfinal round from out west in Salt Lake City, Utah, as our playoff field has now shrunk from 7 teams to 4 as the Chaos and Atlas and the Whipsnakes all move on. They now join the Water Dogs in the semifinals, which will be played next weekend, September 5th, from Philadelphia. All of that and more as we get rolling on today's PLL Flash. But Austin, how are we feeling today now in the week following our first round of the PLL playoffs? We'll have a weekend off actually here ahead of the semifinals, which is kind of a bummer. But overall, how are we feeling?
You know what? I'm doing okay, Ryan. I think 3 games was a nice happy medium between sort of the stop-start that we've had. So I'm very happy. Some of the outcomes were a little gut-wrenching, but I mean, that's sports. I mean, it is what it is. But I'm looking forward to next weekend.
Obviously, you got a winner, you got a loser. Obviously, being fans of certain teams, obviously very gut-wrenching there when your team does not get the win. But you mentioned there, the PLL goes from the biggest weekend in league history out in Albany with those 6 games over 3 days to just 3 games over 2 days, which will now go down as the final games of the season played on a Friday or Saturday. And now we'll see us go down to not just 3 games, but 2 games next weekend in the semifinal, and then obviously just the 1 game for the championship. And then, as I said, we'll have those semifinals on Sunday, September 5th, starting early, an 11 a.m. start on the East Coast, which is 8 a.m. Pacific time, with the second game to follow at 1:30. And then we'll see the championship game played on Sunday, September 19, from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., from, I should say, the United States capital, Washington, D.C. So we quickly go from a full slate of games each weekend to what is now just 3 more remaining, as we no longer have that consolation bracket that we saw in 2019. And as I said before, we have 4 teams left set to face off in 2 separate matchups. In the first, we have the Atlas and the Chaos in their first meeting since week 5, just their second of the season. And then in that second game, we'll see the top seed, the Water Dogs, led by MVP and midfielder of the year nominee Zach Currier, taking on the 2-time defending champions, the Whipsnakes, who are led by the reigning 2 MVPs, the 2019 and 2020 MVPs in Matt Rambo and Zed Williams, both who are now fully healthy and seeming to be playing their best lacrosse at the right time. And this will be the second time that these 2 teams meet this season. The Water Dogs took the first meeting in Colorado Springs just a few weeks ago in week 7. But before we get to looking ahead to these semifinal games, let's take a look back at our quarterfinal results, as they did not disappoint. Let's start on Friday night as the Chaos joined the Water Dogs as the second team in the semifinals. They knocked off the Archers, who at times, especially at the beginning of the year, looked like and seemed like one of the more dominating teams in the league, whether it was offensively or defensively. The score differential all season really told much of that story, and it seemed like this could have been the year that the Archers made a legit run. But for the second time in the first 3 years of the league's history, the Archers are out of the dance in the quarterfinal round. And for the second straight season, Austin, it's at the hands of Andy Towers and the Chaos.
Yeah, it was a nice case of Austin, eating crow in that game, as I boldly predicted that the Archers would go on to win the title.
Hey, I had the Archers obviously as a title favorite. I don't know if I had them going all the way as just like a pick. I don't know if I made a pick there with the league, but definitely the Archers looked like a team that was going to make some noise, not just there in the quarterfinal round, but come the semifinal and championship.
Yeah, I think the last 2 years it's been that case. It's been the case. It's the Archers have, where is their weakness? They have a very good goaltending tandem, a very veteran goaltending tandem. They have probably the best, attack and midfield unit combined in the league when it comes to top to bottom. I mean, Christian Mazzone couldn't even make it in your lineup because Trey Leclerc came in and was an assassin from deep. Like, you have probably the best short stick D-mid trio in the league with Dom and Moose and Latrell. Treasy there, my guy. And then you bring in Graham Hoskin, you have Warren Jeffrey. So, like, you add to a great decor. And it hasn't worked out. 2019 was a bit different because Schreiber had the shoulder injury at halftime. So, I was rooting for the Archers. I am still a big Chaos guy, so don't get me wrong. I'm not upset that the Chaos won. I will say that the next conversation I have with Andy Towers is likely going to be an awkward one to start, but that's okay. The best thing about Pick'em and stuff like that is I don't know if it's weird for me, is I actually like when people sort of light me up for bad picks, because it's kind of like, hey, you just throw a funny gif up and it's water under the bridge usually. It's just kind of fun. But I mean, all due respect to Chaos and all credit to Chaos, they were fantastic. Blaze Reardon is the goalie of the year, and as Jack Rowlett said post game, he has a very good claim to be an MVP candidate. I don't know that he wins it, but he certainly has a strong case to win it. And if they don't go with one of the top scorers, I think it's got to be Blaze, because if Chaos makes another run at the title, I know we're not supposed to take playoff performance into account, but that game was incredible. Jack Rowlett did a number on Grant Ament. I mean, Jesus. Kyle Jackson, how are you, pal? KJ, I love KJ. And shout out, he's a Halifax Thunderbird, so he's going to have to see a lot of me soon. But yeah, good for him, man. I'm very happy that, you know, it was a ballsy move to play him at attack and from X. No, nonetheless. But they didn't put Graham Hossack on him. They put I believe it was Warren Jeffrey most of the time, and KJ was able to sort of exploit that matchup and use his quickness and his playmaking. And he also had a couple of ground ball pickups for easy goals in front too. There's the Archers couple Butterfinger moments in front of their own net, but KJ was fantastic. Dane Smith was really buried in this whole thing. He had 6 points of his own, and he had his first 2-pointer of his career. Like, the Canadians came to play. Team Canada came to play. So, you know, all due respect to Chaos, and it's kind of what we've been saying in the lead up to this. Like, you know, Chaos has been up and down, but don't let them get hot, because they're not a fun team to play against when they get hot, especially when, you know, a guy like Chase Fraser didn't really have the biggest impact in this game. He did have, I believe, a goal or two, but Tanner Cook had 3 points. He wasn't even the guy that really featured in here. When Tanner Cook has 3 points and Dane Smith and Kyle Jackson have 6 points each, and Josh Byrne only has 1, like, your offense is pretty well spread out. That's a good offense. I don't know what they're going to do, because Jake Vaccaro's got to get back in somehow, so somebody's got to come out. I'm assuming that's Tanner Cook, because you can't take Kyle Jackson out after that performance. There's not a chance he comes out of the lineup in the semis, unless I'm wrong, which I generally am. So,
and we'll give that if so, and it's whatever.
Yeah, as I say every time I make a prediction, just make sure to capture it for later use in case. And let me know, light me up if it happens, like Pick'em. I mean, I'm not a smart man. I never claimed to be. So, but the Chaos deserved to be there. 13%, a lot was made of that. I mean, it's like the Atlas earlier in the season. They really, you know, played that chip on their shoulder, and, you know, again, they proved that the Archers may have been the better team on paper, but, you know, it's the old saying, as the paper doesn't play the game. So, you know, Chaos is moving on. Good for them.
You mentioned it there before. Blaze Reardon, a 2021 MVP finalist. He's one of 5, so we'll see, obviously, how that all shakes out. But for this Archers team, not enough there in the end, as just 1 goal scored in the fourth quarter against Blaze allowed the Chaos to stretch their lead and make it a multiple possession game. And eventually that became too much for the Archers to overcome. Obviously, all these offensive weapons, but when you're in a 3-goal game, you're kind of trying to take those 2-point opportunities. When you're taking those 2-point opportunities, you're not really settling for the best shots. So obviously, you see how that kind of ends. The Archers season will end a little earlier again than they'd hoped for that 3rd straight year. And for the 2nd straight season, the Chaos are advancing to the semifinals. And as you said before, it's kind of like, again, kind of out of nowhere for the 2nd straight season. Started 0-4 last year in the bubble. Went on a 3-0 playoff run. They dropped their first 3 games this season. They've been on a tear, though, lately. I believe 4-2 there to close out the regular season, or 5-2. They now win this quarterfinal game, and they are advancing to the semifinals, and this will actually be their 3rd semifinal appearance, as in 2019 they found themselves in a pretty weird lose in advance or win and get a bye straight to the championship situation in that first round. They lost to the Whipsnakes, who ended up getting that bye through to the championship, and then the Chaos lost to the Redwoods in the semifinals. Whipsnakes would then go on to win their first championship, as we all know, but this will now be the 2nd straight year that the Chaos make a playoff push, as last year they managed to get past the Archers in the semifinals, who they've now beaten 3 times in their last 4 meetings. The Chaos have won 5 of the last 6 against the Archers, dating back to the inaugural season in 2019. But Austin, the big story in this game, you mentioned there before for the Chaos, attackman Kyle Jackson. He gets inserted into this lineup with the injury to Chris Cloutier, and he assumes that role at X on that attack, playing behind and around the goal, flanked by Josh Byrne, Chase Frazier. And this is a Chaos team that has really been getting hot down the stretch, starting to click all over the field. Jackson comes in, makes some dazzling plays, as you mentioned there before, some garbage goals, as you could call them, finishes coming off the ride, a lot of being in the right place, kind of being in the right place, right time kind of situations. He caps off the night totaling 4 goals on 8 shots along with 2 assists. Mind you, he scored 3 goals and an assist in 5 games this season, and he hasn't played since July 10th. So as you said, safe to say we should see him in the lineup come the semifinal, but then again, it is the PLL. We have no idea. There is so much talent on this Chaos team in this league. So we honestly have no idea. But Kyle Jackson coming in, gelling with this Chaos offense that is also paced, as you said, by Dane Smith. He totaled 6 points on the evening. And really just, as you said, production coming from everywhere. Offensively, a handful of different guys were getting involved. Defensively, Blaze only had to make 13 saves. Talk about how great Blaze has been. He's had to make 20 saves in losses. In 1-goal losses, he makes 13 saves in this 4-goal win. You know, as I said, we're accustomed to seeing him have to make around 20 saves to get a win. And then you look at the face-off stripe. I think one of the biggest points of emphasis from this game, Max Adler has been struggling for much of this season. He puts together one of his best performances of the season against a guy who he split draws with just a week ago. So it seems like everything is starting to come together for this Chaos team at the right time. And Austin, that like what you said before, I mentioned it there, it's nothing new. We've seen this before from this Chaos team, and it looks like an unexpected turnaround is once again in the works, and kind of unexpected in the kind of sense that we didn't see it happening, obviously, coming out of the regular season.
Yeah, it's tough. A couple wins, a couple losses. I think obviously you weren't going to replicate what they did last year when they went 0-4 and then also lost to the Water Dogs in their last game of the round robin. But we know this is a team that's highly motivated. They always play with the chip on their shoulder because of, the Canadian, maybe it's the Canadian field bias and people thinking the Canadians aren't great. I don't know how you look at this team and don't think Canadians can't play field. That's not a thing, obviously. But you sort of discount them because they're a bunch of box guys. I discounted them. I discounted Chase Frazier. I'll straight up say it. I said he's a box guy. I've never seen him play field. He goes out and scores 8 goals last week, combined between 2 games. It's like, okay, thank you. That's a nice guy to have in your roster. You picked up out of the player pool. This team is good. This team is really, really good. They have the best goalie in the world. Their defense is very underrated. I think Jack Roulette's really coming alive, and he's a Defender of the Year candidate. He's really coming alive as your top matchup defender. Jared Newman's playing his role. He's not as offensive. I think that's sort of the knock on him from 2019 that everyone's been talking about. He doesn't take as many chances offensively, and he hasn't actually, I think he's 0 for 5 on 2-point shots this year, so he actually hasn't hit the net, I don't believe, on any of those shots, or they've been saved. Obviously, with the 0 for 5, Austin, big math guy here.
Big math guy.
Big math guy. Yeah, and I mean, when you look at like Troy Ray, even Dan Coates has chipped in a little bit. CJ Costabile's been a big thing. Ian McKay. CJ Costabile's arrival has allowed Ian McKay to become more of a two-way midfielder, which I really like. Maybe not so much a short stick, but he's been able to, play back on his defensive end when he needs to. But he's also able to play that offensive role, and I think that's what suits Mickey a lot, is that he's just sort of able to plug and play wherever you need him. This team, I could talk about the offense all day, but when a guy like Kyle Jackson, who had 4 points on the season, steps in and leads your team in scoring in a playoff game, you're doing something right. So, Andy Towers is talking about this team going all the way to having people pick this team 0% on the fan vote. I mean, that's a pipe dream, because you already know. I put it in a tweet that Jack Arlette said that they don't want anybody that voted against them last week, but I bet there's going to be a lot of people voting with them this week, even if it is, the Atlas. It's a tough matchup, but I don't doubt Chaos can pull it out.
I'm currently, I guess, looking at that matchup, Atlas Chaos. I'm currently in kind of in flux. I'm not sure who I'm going to go with at this point in time. Obviously, we're just under 2 weeks away from that game. I should say over a week and a half away from that game. So obviously a lot of time to see what we want to think here. But I had the Archers in this one. As I said, though, on Goal Line Extended last Friday, I said I feel like we're going to get a run here from the Chaos, even though I'm taking the Archers in this game. I just like them as the team to win if I had to choose. But I could see the Chaos making somewhat of a run here in this postseason. Obviously, one game in, they're making a run. But the Chaos, after losing their first 3 games over the first 2 weekends of the season, they've now won 5 of their last 7 games, and they look to ride into Philly with a lot left to prove against the Atlas, who advanced their first semifinal appearance after winning their first playoff game in franchise history, as Ben Rubier's team eliminated the Cannons on Saturday, powered in large part by 5 goals offensively in what was a 10-goal third quarter and a defensive shutout there in the fourth, which allowed the Atlas to cruise to a 13-9 win. And the Bulls were also powered by the play of attackman Eric Law and Jeff Teat. Law finished the day with a hat trick and 4 assists, totaling 7 points, and the rookie Teat in his first PLL playoff game finished the afternoon with a hat trick along with an assist. And Austin, this offense just continues to dominate. You look up and down the stat sheet, really, along with those other 2 guys, Law and Teat. 3 others, Cockerton, Caraway, and Costabile, all had a multi-goal game. So Romar Dennis also, he stung a corner there on a filthy on-the-run shot. Trevor Baptiste, along with winning over 70% at the stripe and picking up a dozen ground balls, he added an assist to his stat line as well. He's always dangerous pushing the ball forward off the draw. And then you look at, obviously, these defensive midfielders in transition. They're very aggressive, whether it's moving the ball and starting early or taking good shots on goal. So moral of the story, this offense is scary, and also there's a lot of different ways, I should say, that they can hurt you, this Atlas offense.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Teat's the obvious one, but you hit it on the head there. There's just too many weapons that you have to account for within this offense that can sting you. And Romar Dennis being one of the guys that isn't as consistent in this offense, when he's going, they're nearly unstoppable. When he isn't, they're still deadly. It's not like he's hindering them in any way, and I don't want it to come out that way. But the knock on him has always been that the shooting's a little inconsistent. But he's a monster. Jeff Teat's a monster. He's probably my pick for MVP at the moment, just because. What do you even want me to say?
There's the Canadian bias. Obviously, if you're, we're in a tough situation this week, you and your fellow Canadians, you either got Jeff Teat or the Chaos here in the semifinal.
Yeah, it's a tough way to think about a Team Canada against, Mr. Canada, Jeff Teat, Mr. Generation. But, Atlas can beat you in a lot of different ways, which is nice. And you either have to worry about the long distance from Romar and Costabile and all these guys. Dox is another guy that can hurt you from out there. Or you have to worry about the ball movement, swinging it to Caraway, who's also a killer from the outside and from distance. There's too many ways that this team can really run the score up on you, whether it's Baptiste in transition, whether it's the guys pushing transition and catching defenses sliding or rotating off of guys. It is not easy. And, we probably should give more of a shout out to JD Colarusso. Again, it's fantastic. We talked about Concannon possibly being in. He's not. I don't really, truth be told, I didn't get to see a whole lot of this game. I had to run out that day, but Atlas is unbelievable. And it's, beating a team like the Cannons, regardless of their record, is not easy. You have to guard Lyle. You have to guard Paul Rabel. You have to guard Stephen Rafus. You have to guard all of these different guys. Shane Jackson had a good game. It's never an easy out. It's the same thing we go back to every single week. No team is an easy out in this league. And the Cannons, it's tough to see. I would have liked to see Lyle contend for a championship, but it wasn't meant to be. I mean, Paul Rabel's team made the playoffs, so there's something to be said for that in a season where everybody didn't make the playoffs. So, it depends if you put the asterisk around it. If this is the first time Rabel's made the playoffs officially in the PLL, if you're going by literal, then obviously he's made it. But you know what I'm trying to say. There's a video circulating of Rabel, giving a little love tap to a guy that's not a great look for him.
I believe Danny Logan is the player that was on the other end of that unfortunate love tap. And he just shrugged it off. He just kept. It seemed like it didn't even faze him. Danny Logan just kept running, kept doing his thing.
That's why you wear a cup.
I didn't at first in my high school days. Obviously, back to the high school days here, Ryan. But then I did take a unfortunate shot down there one time, and I said I'm wearing this from now on. Now
everything seems okay with not wearing a cup until you soak an outside shot. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's not a great look for him, but in the context of the situation, I mean, the emotions are really high, and if he was severely injured, it would have been a lot worse. It's good that Danny Logan wasn't hurt off of that because it's obviously a sensitive area and somewhere that could have been bad. But you know, the Cannons will be back. They'll be fine. They have the pieces. They're gonna have a couple guys to take home hardware this year, I think. Yeah, the Atlas are good, man. Canada is gonna have a hard chance or a hard choice. You said it. Whether it's Atlas and it's just Heat. A lot of Brampton, Ontario is going to be behind the Atlas, but the rest of Canada, especially Buffalo fans and stuff like that, will be behind the Atlas or behind the Chaos. So it'll be fun. It's going to be fun because this is a team that we didn't really expect to be here in the Atlas, and a team that's trying to prove that they belong back here in the Chaos, and that last year wasn't just a fluke and a heater that they went on. So it's exciting. I just I'm not looking forward to the other matchup because I don't. Anyway, we'll get to that. I'm excited for this matchup.
Definitely excited for this Chaos Atlas matchup. And then obviously just looking back at this Atlas Cannons game, we talked about obviously the offense for the Atlas. The Cannons defense, as you mentioned there before, came together, played great. You mentioned JD Colarusso in his 5th start since replacing Jack Concannon back there in week 4. Colarusso turned away 64% of the shots he faced, good for 14 saves in the day. And then, as you said, Concannon, his status is still unknown. Heading into that semifinal, he was scratched just ahead of the game as he was yet to be cleared. So something that will follow into the next couple of weeks. But you talk about into the weekend and obviously the following week. But you talk about Lyle Thompson, a Paul Rabel team. This Atlas defense just held them to 9 goals in a playoff game. Like that's just incredible. Obviously, just to say that it's just 9 goals in a playoff game. Obviously, you look at this Atlas defense. They've given up more than 10 goals once since I believe it was week 5 or week 4. So this Atlas defense has been stifling here over the past couple of weeks. They'd allowed really just putting together great performance after great performance, led by a guy like Michael Rexroad. We talked about kind of award finalist. He's not a defensive player of the year award finalist, a guy that I think we could have considered.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think when we did our thing, Rexroad was at least in consideration for my finalists. I left Burns off there from the Water Dogs strictly because he wasn't really a close defender. He was more of a slide guy that got a lot of CTOs, but the stats speak for themselves. You can't argue with the fact that he's, I believe, the league leader or tied for the league lead in CTOs and ground balls. So, Rexroad did a hell of a job, and he was leading the league in CTOs for a long time, and he was taking on big matchups. I think when you're able,
Lyle Thompson in both matchups, the Zed Williams matchups, the big matchups is what Michael Rexroad was tasked with, and obviously coming up big here against the Cannons in this one.
When you're able to step into a lineup and supplant Tucker Durkin as the number 1 defender, you're doing something right. And I think this whole unit as a whole, I mean, Cade Van Raphorst, Chick, Pafani, Kyle Pless, Danny Logan, Peter Dirth, guys like that. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, so apologies. But just the whole unit, I guess Costabile is a 2-way guy in the odd thing, but just the entire unit, I think maybe more than anything, we were sort of sleeping on their defense because of, as much as maybe some people don't think Kyle Hartzell was a massive loss, he's a guy that sort of led that defense, and he was a voice for that defense. So, the rebuilding process or the retooling process, whatever you'd like to call it with Atlas, I think the D was the thing that people thought was going to take the most time to come around because you don't find those number 1 matchup defensemen every day. And certainly, we didn't think there was anybody out of this class, all due respect to them, that was going to be that guy that could step in right away and be a number 1 shutdown D-man. Atlas found him. Atlas found Michael Rexroad. He's taken on a lot of big challenges. That's allowed Tucker Durkin to be that second guy and, take on a good matchup, sort of manage the defense a little bit and take on that role like a Matt McMahon or an Eddie Glazner where he tells people where they need to be and he organizes everybody. So it works really well. But that defense is very slept on, and if the goaltending keeps up, this could be a very good run for the Atlas. And I think they're going to be proving a lot of people wrong against Chaos because, Chaos is positionless, but I really like the Atlas defense. I think it'll be interesting to see because the Archers defense, I think, is arguably the best in the league, and Chaos made them look pretty silly last week. So, we'll see how it goes. But Rexroad probably deserved to be in the Defensive Player of the Year award. He was left out. Maybe that's fuel for next year, but he's leading a group that's firing on all cylinders right now, and that's kind of a scary thing when your defense is firing as well as they are and holding people under 10 goals a game.
The players and coaches voted on the finalists here for these awards. So obviously adding some merit to who got selected here for these finalist awards. The winners will be chosen by the PLL Lacrosse Advisory Board, I believe media. Not sure who's the media or what media is going to be voting on that. And then PLL front office will be voting for the winners. But the finalists were all chosen by the players and coaches. So obviously give us an idea of what they were thinking in terms of those awards. But the Alice, you mentioned it there, looking to make a run here in 2021, already have, I should say, surprised a lot of people this season, trying to continue surprising people here in 2021. Let's look at the Cannons. You look at the offensive production this past week, and obviously aside from Shane Jackson lighting it up for 4 goals, Lyle Thompson, a goal on 6 shots and 2 assists. Paul Rabel, a 2-point goal on 8 shots and an assist. Ryan Drenner, just 1 assist on 5 shots after being held scoreless and pointless a week ago. And then Rookie of the Year nominee Stephen Rafis, he was also very quiet. He only had an assist. So this Atlas defense managing to shut down the top opposing offensive threats week after week, some of whom are the best in the game. Lyle Thompson, obviously one of the best in the game, and JD Colarusso continuing to play some of his best lacrosse with Jack on Cannon's return looming. A story that we will follow into next weekend ahead of the semifinal against the Chaos, which is our first semifinal matchup, and we will have much more on that game next week on Goal Line Extended, as we'll be having 2 shows, one on Tuesday and then one on Friday to look ahead to these semifinals. But let's talk about that third and final game of the weekend first, as for the 3rd straight season, the Redwoods season ends in a heartbreak at the hands of the Whipsnakes, who storm back from a 9-5 halftime deficit. They mount a 9-4 second-half comeback that is capped off by another Matt Rambo game-winning goal, as for the 2nd time this season, for the 3rd consecutive time in elimination, and for the 6th meeting now out of the past 8. The Whipsnakes get the better of the Redwoods, coming away with a 14-13 win. But before we talk about the Whipsnakes, Austin, let's start with the Redwoods, as this loss marks the end of a 17-year career for Redwoods midfielder Kyle Harrison, as one of the best figures in the sport, one of the best players over the past 2 decades, calls it quits after an incredible career. And we here at Flash want to thank K18 for everything that he's done to elevate the game and allow it to take these next steps forward that have gotten us to where we are today, and for everything that he will continue to do now that he's no longer playing. But before this game even started, the Redwoods seem to be at odds. T.D. Owen goes down the week before in what was a meaningless game. He gets scratched midway through the week towards the end of last week before the game. Midfielder Sergio Perkovic is placed on the physically unable to perform list with not much of reasoning given. But the Redwoods come out of the gate firing. They jump out to a 9-5 halftime lead, but then you could see the wheels starting to come off there in the 3rd. Joe Nardella started to get hot at the stripes. Zed Williams started hitting his targets. Brian Phipps settled in between the pipes, and then all of a sudden, we got a tie game going to the 4th quarter.
Yeah. Kyle Harrison, just real quick, I want to circle back on that and just say congratulations on a fantastic career. I am not somebody that came up watching field lacrosse, but obviously Kyle Harrison is one of the pioneers that really brought the sport to the masses with his play. Thank you for everything, Kyle. And I know he's going to do
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. And I know he's going to do fantastic things. He's involved with the Black Lacrosse Alliance and various other organizations like that, and he'll still be involved with the league. So I'm excited to, like you said, I'm also excited to see what his next impact on the game is, because it's going to be big. In terms of this matchup, it's the Whipsnakes, man. The Whips is the Whips, as I'll throw it back to the Browns from last year in the NFL playoffs there. Just when you think you have them figured out, they just come back and crush your soul. And when I was talking about games that really gutted me off the top, it was this one. Just from, I've said it in previous episodes that I dislike the Whipsnakes because it's boring to watch them play because they win so much now, so often. Not to say that they are a bad team, not to say they are anything other than dominant. I hate them because they are so goddamn dominant, which is good for them. Good business is booming for them. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, as far as the game goes, I mean, you had to hope Drew Simino could hold up as long as he could against Joe Nardella, but I mean that was going to end at some point, and Joe was just going to go on a run, and he tends to find Zed in transition when he's able to pinch and pop from the stripe, and that's the end of that.
Was able to do that once there in that game.
It just put a goal up on the board as soon as he passed it to Zed. Don't even bother making Zeddy shoot it. Yeah, I mean, I feel for Nat and I feel for the Woods. It's what I put on Twitter after this game. I love Nat St. Laurent. He's an amazing person to talk to, and he's worked his ass off to get this team to a good spot, especially off the field with a bunch of trades and a bunch of personnel decisions. Whether it's, Rob Pennell this season, moving Jules to midfield, grabbing Kyle Thornton midseason, getting TD Erlin in the draft, which, TD fell to him, but he was still able to get his guy. I feel for Nat because I feel like he can't catch a break when it comes to playing this team, which is sad to say because the Redwoods are so effing talented across the board. Tim Troutner has been fantastic. I don't really need to run through the roster. We've been talking about it for the entire season. That midfield unit's fantastic. One of them should win midfielder of the year, probably Miles Jones. I think he should have also been up for an MVP considering that last weekend, but It is what it is. That defense speaks for itself. The midfield speaks for itself. The attack unit's been fantastic without Ryan Lee, who was a big loss midseason. Sergio Perkovic going down before the game, I'd assume that if he was moved to that list, that it was probably something bad enough to warrant being taken out of the game. So hopefully it's, obviously in this time your thought immediately goes to COVID. So I hope Sergio didn't get that, and I hope he's okay. Hopefully he's doing okay. That's what we'll leave it at. The Redwoods to lose 3 straight years by 1 goal to the same team is gut-wrenching for them. It's gut-wrenching for their fans. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch a team. It looked like very much so that last year was going to be the year that they got them when Jeremy Sievert scored that goal in overtime. When they went into halftime with that lead, it was sort of like, this might be the year. This might be it. And it very much was not, as the Whips just do what the Whips do. So more than anything, I'm gutted for the Redwoods. I was cheering for the Archers, obviously, but I was looking forward to seeing the Chaos as well. The Redwoods, I wanted to see take that next step because they've been that team like the Archers that has just come up short multiple times. So those 2 teams I feel really bad for, especially the Redwoods, because I really like their team and I like the guys in their room. We don't know if this is going to be Joe Walters' last game as well. That was sort of, Kyle Harrison, this will be it for him. But does Joe Walters maybe think about hanging it up, especially since he only played in this 1 game this season? So it's tough. Credit to the Whips. They played a hell of a game, but I'm still just sort of searching for words when it comes to the Woods right now because there's so much emotion going into that loss that it's hard to look at the Whips win over what the Woods had to go through and what they're losing going into next season.
I think it's just you saw the emotion on the sideline from Nat St. Laurent. Obviously, it seemed like towards the end of that game, not a lot of the officiating was going their way. Obviously, he expressed his frustration a couple times. Hot Mike called him kind of yelling at the officials. But it's just you see the emotion of him on the sideline. You see the emotion of a lot of these guys. It is obviously just tough to see. It really what I'm looking at it as, I'm like, I want to see some parity. Obviously, the Whipsnakes, they've won their last two championships. They're now 2 wins away from a 3rd in a row. So it's like we would have loved to see that parity. Obviously, bringing in the Archers, the Chaos were in the championship last season. Bring the Archers into the mix. Obviously, the Redwoods being in the mix creates some parity. Great to see, obviously, the Atlas and the Water Dogs there, but definitely this Redwoods team falling at the hands of the Whipsnakes. You mentioned Miles Jones' name before. He unfortunately didn't have a great game, or I should say, unfortunately for him, he finished with 0 points, but definitely a midfielder of the year finalist. Some would argue, you argued, I would argue as well, probably should have been warranted for an MVP finalist spot as Miles Jones put together a great year. But despite a huge day in this game from Jules Henningberg, he tallied 3 goals and 3 assists. Rookie Charlie Bertrand also had a huge PLL playoffs debut as he had 4 goals, but the Redwoods fall here in elimination for the third straight year. And I know you probably don't want to talk about it because we've been talking about it all season. Obviously, past 2 seasons, we've seen the Whipsnakes win the last 2 championships. But Zed Williams, 9 points. Absolutely unbelievable from the 2020 MVP by way of 4 goals, a 2-point goal, and 3 assists. Obviously, we talked about Joe Nardella, his dominance at the faceoff stripe, 19 to 29, 66%. And Brian Phipps comes in at halftime, replaces Kyle Burnmore, makes 6 saves, good for 60%, helping to propel this Whipsnakes team to a Matt Rambo game-winning goal. Your thoughts on the Whipsnakes here coming out of this quarterfinal, heading into a semifinal against the Water Dogs?
Zed is an absolute animal. Matt Rambo is stupidly good at lacrosse, and Thick Boy Nation is proud to have him. It's the team is stacked. Joe Nardella is unbelievable. Jay Carlson is probably actually, I won't say that because I'm too biased towards St. Jackson, but he's one of the best off-ball cutters and scorers in close in lacrosse. He's a guy I'm excited to see in the NLL if he ever does make it there. But yeah, I don't know. Justin Gutterding's added to this team. Like, would anybody be surprised if they won another title this year? Like, let's be honest with ourselves.
Not really.
No, not at all.
Unfortunately, no.
It's not exactly the exciting thing when it comes to the entire fan base, who I'm sure is, sort of like the Warriors when they were going on their run, or the Heat when they were going on their run in the NBA, or insert dynasty here, the Bulls back in the 90s. People just get tired of success and seeing people succeed very often. It's fun when the Whips win the first one and then the second one and the third one. It's like, okay, let's get somebody else in here. But it's dominance. It's pure dominance from Jim Stagnita and his team. And next year they're going to be primed. They're going to lose some. We were talking about this in our chat. They're going to lose some guys in expansion. Maybe a Tierney, or maybe, oh my God,
a Tierney, a Colin Squires, maybe like
Connor
a
Kirst,
Charlie
the name I
Haynes.
was thinking of. Connor Kirst, and
You
instantly bring in Brian Cole, who you got in the player, the entry draft, who you didn't even play this year. And it's like, it just, Jim Stagnita keeps just, I don't want to say chest of checkers, but it's close. He released half his roster last year and just kept adding studs so that he could protect just the guys he needed and not release any, or not expose anybody to the player pool or to the entry draft expansion. Jesus, Austin. We have fun here at Lacrosse Flash.
Oh yeah, we got a ton of drafts we got to think about. Obviously, we got college draft, entry draft, expansion draft. We got all these different drafts. We
NLL draft, MSL
NLL draft this coming Friday. We got to keep track of all this stuff.
Saturday.
You're good. Possibly an NLL Flash on Friday.
It's a good tease, Ryan. I like it.
Tease.
Yes, it looks like we will have an NLL Flash. So keep tuned for that. Stay tuned for that, I should say. Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's hard to talk about the Whipsnakes because we've been pumping their tires for 3 years now. Zed Williams having 9 points is just asinine. It's silly, especially since he's a guy that doesn't really dish the rock very often. 9 points is unbelievable. And that's to be said that I think Joe Keegan tweeted out that Zed has, or he mentioned it in passing, that Zed has the lowest assist total off assist chances or something along those lines. I forget the exact stat. He's like 1 for 18 or something like that. So it's just unfortunate luck he's had this year with dishing the rock. They're probably going to win the title. I mean, Water Dogs, somebody prove me wrong. I hope they do make it to the title game. Your boy's going to DC, so that'd be fun to watch the Whipsnakes play live. That'll be just fun to watch PLL lacrosse live, to be honest with you. But it's not going to be easy against the Water Dogs. It's the 1 seed. You can't discount them. So they're going to come to play. It's going to be a question. I'm sure you're going to ask me about the Water Dogs, so I'll leave the analysis for that. But I'm sure they're going to push them to the limit, so it'll be interesting to watch.
Obviously, going into these 2 semifinal games, the Water Dogs and Whipsnakes, that will be the second game there on Sunday, September 5th. So not this Sunday, the following Sunday. And as I said, we'll have 2 shows, Goal Line Extended, next week ahead of that game. But we got the Water Dogs and Whipsnakes, top seed and the number 5 seed. The Water Dogs coming off 4 straight wins. So definitely a great matchup that we're looking forward to. These teams met just a couple weeks ago in week 7. So this will be the rematch of that game. And then that first semifinal will be the Atlas and the Chaos, their second meeting of the season. Obviously, we saw the Atlas back, I believe, in week 5, possibly week 4, take down the Chaos by a score of 16-10. So that will be the first semifinal, 11 a.m. Eastern start on NBCSN, followed by the Water Dogs and Whipsnakes also on NBCSN. And yeah, we'll talk about the Water Dogs here before we kind of wrap up this show. As not too much to talk about today. Obviously, we have these games, some award stuff to talk about here, but let's talk about the Water Dogs. Sowers, Michael Sowers, rookie attackman. He's back on the injured list. Coach Copeland put him back on that list ahead of this weekend's games. We don't know too much about how it works in terms of taking guys off the injured list. We do know that if a coach puts a player on the injured list during the playoffs, that player is then ineligible. That coach would be able to then replace that player. We don't know what the case would be if obviously Sowers starting the playoffs on the injured list. Is he able to come off that list? The War Dogs are at 25 players, so it's just kind of complicating things. But do you think that we see Michael Sowers return here in this semifinal game? Obviously, against the Whipsnakes, 2-time defending champs, the Water Dogs could use him and could use his return.
I couldn't tell you, man.
Inside Austin, come on. I was leading on you
there. I have no inside information on Michael Sowers, unfortunately, nor have I asked. I've sort of just, with head injuries, it's a tough thing with players. I think you've seen it in hockey, especially with a guy. The first one that comes to mind for me is Mark Savard, who tried to come back. And, post-concussion syndrome is a big thing, and you don't want to. If Michael Sowers isn't completely right, then don't risk it, is sort of how I look at it. It's not how every fan's going to look at it, because obviously Michael Sowers wants to play. If the second he can get back in there, regardless of, the ramifications of what could happen, he wants to be in there to help his team win a title. But could he be in the lineup? Absolutely. Could he not? Also, absolutely. It's sort of a Switzerland way of saying I have no idea what Andy Copeland's going to do. The good thing for him, and the good problem he has here, is that his team still secured the 1 seed with Michael Sowers not playing in 8 of their games. So I don't think they're rushing him back. I mean, he's been off since June, so rushing back might not be the best way to explain it. But they're not going to rush him into any situations that they're not both comfortable with, both the Water Dogs and Sowers personally. If they feel that he's ready to go, then absolutely you throw him in. I don't think you throw him in the regular role he was playing against the Cannons in week 1, where you make him play as your top X attack, but I think you maybe run him out of the box and let him use his. I really like how the Atlas utilized Jeff Teat, and also how Chaos utilized Kyle Jackson, guys. More so Kyle Jackson, maybe, that a guy that has speed and can sort of beat you around the edge. I think with Sowers' speed, if you give him a room on the wing and you let him operate from there, I think he could make a lot of dangerous things happen. And maybe you run, I don't know, a Ben Reeves or somebody like that out from X and just let them sort of take on that physical matchup. I think Sowers is going to demand the top pull regardless, but maybe that creates a mismatch behind the net for somebody at X, and they're able to take advantage of it. I'm excited to see if Michael Sowers is back. I am not convinced he will be back because I thought he would be back a little while ago, and like I said, head injuries are a tricky thing. So it's sort of saying something without saying anything at all, unfortunately, but I don't want to walk myself into a thing where I say Michael Sowers is absolutely going to be back, and then we don't see him for the rest of the season. So
I broke news there a couple weeks ago. I was like, yeah, he's off the injured list. Like, it's a big deal, and then he obviously just
he was on the sidelines after you promoted that. He was on the sideline for the team that week. He wasn't on the roster, I don't believe, but he was there. It's just maybe it's rust, maybe it's just he's not ready to go. I don't know what it is. I hope he's back, because for the fans' sake, that'd be a really fun return, especially against the Whipsnakes. I think he'd have a huge impact on the game. But yeah, if he's not ready to go, then don't risk it. I think you would obviously agree with me on this, that his long-term health is more important than one playoff game, and I think most people would agree with that as well. So yeah, hoping for the best for Michael, but friend of the show, friend of GLE, I should say.
Absolutely.
But a great guy, and I hope he's back to full health, and whenever he's ready, I'm excited to watch him.
All signs pointed to him making his return there ahead of week 7. He had something out on Instagram saying, yeah, this is when I'm looking to return. He didn't make that return in week 7. He didn't make his return in week 8, and then placed back on the injured list ahead of the quarterfinals. We will see, and obviously hope for the sake of our just watching that he's back on the field there for the semifinals, as we have two big semifinal games: Chaos Atlas, Whip Snakes, and Water Dogs. Obviously, a lot of possibilities that we could see. We could see a championship rematch between the Whip Snakes and Chaos. We could see the two Canadian teams, Chaos and the Water Dogs, going at it there in the championship game. We could see the number 1 and number 2 overall pick going at it. If we see Michael Sowers return from injury, we could see the War Dogs and Atlas there in the championship game. So a lot of great stuff that we'll be talking about and diving into in the next week, and obviously looking ahead to that championship game. But the Water Dogs, they also bring in Christian Mazzone from the Archers, as his season will continue. He comes on as their 25th man, as I said there before. They do have 25. I'd imagine if Sowers comes in, they'll have to release somebody, but I imagine that won't be Christian Mazzone, as he comes in most likely as a piece that I'd imagine Andy Copeland wants to utilize, whether it's on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. But where do you see a guy like Mazzone fitting in here on this War Dogs midfield, along with guys like Connor Kelly, along with guys like Zach Courier, Mikey Schlosser, Ryan Conrad there in the middle of that field?
It's a good question. I think you maybe run him out in somewhat of a Jay Carlson-like role, where he just finds dead spots or soft spots in the defense, and you feed him the ball in close and he finishes. He's proven that he can do that. Maybe you run him out of the box and he does the same thing he did for the Archers last year. I think there's a number of ways you can use him, and I think, Andy Copeland said in the past that, Andy Towers is a big proponent of using that box style in the two-man game. Andy Copeland likes running that same style as well when he can, and he has a lot of Canadians to do it. And I think Mazzone sort of fits it with the way he plays and the way he's able to finish in tight. So I would look for, and it all depends on Sowers again, but like he said, if Sowers is back, I think maybe you see a Matt Witcher, unfortunately, get released, or I don't know what the situation is.
They have Cole Williams still on their roster right now. I would imagine Cole Williams would grab a short straw there.
Yeah, also that, since Witcher's actually been playing for them, that makes a lot of sense. I forgot Cole Williams was with them. I think Mazzone can fit into a lot of different, wear a lot of different hats, I should say, for this team. I'm interested to see what those hats are. Maybe you run him off the wing. Maybe you run him out of the box. Maybe you run him at attack and use him like Jay Carlson. I think he sort of fits into any spot you need him to in the lineup, which I think is nice for Andy Copeland. It's kind of tough for the Archers to see that they had to let a guy like that go, but they were too stacked out front. So, I'm excited and I'm happy that he gets his chance. He definitely deserves it after the championship series. So Maz hopefully gets into the game and hopefully he scores a couple goals. That'd be fun.
The War Dogs come into this semifinal game, obviously looking to win their first PLL playoff game, as they did not win their one playoff game that they had last year in the PLL bubble out in Utah. They'll have the Whip Snakes. We'll see how they can do. Obviously, if we can see Christian Mazzone, if we can see a guy like Michael Sowers, hoping that they'll put up good performances if we do see their returns. But the semifinals are set for next weekend. And as I said before, we'll be back to look ahead to these semifinals next week, as at the end of this week, we'll have an NLL Flash put together to look ahead to the NLL draft on Saturday. And then next week, we're looking to have 2 shows, one at the beginning of the week and then one at the end of the week. So make sure to keep your eyes and ears open for that. Follow both the show and Lacrosse Flash across social media. But Austin, I want to thank you for joining me today as we reflect on the quarterfinal round of the PLL playoffs and look ahead a little bit to the semi-finals. But that is going to do it for today's episode of the PLL Flash. I want to thank you all for watching. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to Lacrosse Flash on YouTube and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any future shows, and follow along on Instagram and Twitter at Lacrosse Flash. All the links that you will need, including our website, lacrosseflash.com, will be in the description, so make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. I hope you all have an incredible week, and we will talk to you next week as we look ahead to the semifinals. Cheers.